You know, I could tell you one way or the other right now, but I think if you come on April 27th, you might be pleasantly surprised. There would have never been a Donnie B without Dennis Coralluzzo. I just saw the two of them. I said, this is it. Trent Acid, Johnny Kashmere, you're the Backseat Boyz. My cell phone starts blowing up. Everybody's like, you're not going to believe this. Ratchet pinned Sid. Main events on the show was Ratchet versus Lawler. That was Ratchet's last match. It was Jerry Lawler's last match in the ring. It was a brainchild of myself and a couple other guys. Eddie versus Nova. It legitimized us as a company, and it gave Nova the confidence to know that he could be a WWF superstar. And Eddie Guerrero gave me back his pay envelope, and he worked the show for free. And all the boys got a little extra payoff that night from Eddie Guerrero. There should be a universal championship that can be represented on the indies. What I always loved about Andrew is what you see is what you get. Just a fun-loving, good family man who just wants the best for his family. Oh my God, if I make a wrong move out there, I'm dead.
Ladies and gentlemen, hosted by Coach C, Chris Sanders, this is Best for Business.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Another episode of Best for Business. I'm pumped for this one. I say it all the time. One of my favorite minds in pro wrestling, big 80s Donnie B, man. Thank you for joining me for this one.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's I promised you a while ago, probably a year or two ago. I said, hey man, yeah, we'll do it whenever. And it was a while, but we're here.
I just looked back at the message. I think it was like around this time a year ago today. I first reached out to the network and just like asked for advice or something.
Yeah, and I think I gave you some pretty good advice.
Yeah,
and,
oh yeah. I still appreciate it.
I've always been cool with that, man. If people reach out, I'll tell them whatever tidbits I can give you, but thanks for asking.
Yeah, so for me, whenever I watch a Spokecast or anything, I tell you all the time, you are dropping knowledge. You are blowing my mind with anything you pretty much say. But I'm curious, you've done a few podcasts, but briefly, like, how did you get that itch for pro wrestling? What was it for you that really stuck out?
Like a lot of others that are in the business today, all the successful ones, started out as a fan as a kid, late 70s. Full disclosure, I am 52 years old. I was born in 1972. So my brother and I, Nova, we used to watch wrestling on Saturday mornings growing up. We watched anything and everything. Southwest Championship, Georgia Championship, anything we can get our hands on. Our big one was MSG because we had the Madison Square Garden channel. We'd watch it once a month, super late at night. We saw the show with Snuka coming off the cage on Morocco. It was life-changing. But, my dad took us to our first show in 83, I think, live at the Airport Plaza. I remember it like it was yesterday. We bought the tickets, saw our first show live, and we were hooked. And then soon after that, we went to our second show, which was in Raritan, New Jersey, at the Raritan High School. The main event was Rocky Johnson and Andre the Giant versus Mr. Fuji and Don Morocco. And I remember as a kid staying up like for the whole week making our signs. And the highlight of my childhood was we didn't know what they were called back then, except good guys and bad guys, but we knew the good guys were going to come out. So we ran over, and when Andre and Rocky Johnson came out, this hand right here, this left hand, reached up and patted Andre the Giant on his back.
Wow.
When he walked by me, dude. So that was pretty cool. And right from that moment, we were like, this is the greatest shit we've ever seen. Like, pro wrestling is everything. And, watched it through the years, and that's how we became fans.
So growing up, like, who was like your guy?
Hogan. Well, we were big. Even before that, like Superstar Graham, Backlund was cool, but like for full transparency, it was Hogan. When Hogan hit the scene, we were like, this is the greatest thing we've ever seen. Hulk Hogan, like we were all in. We were right around 10, 11 years old when Hulkamania was just kind of starting. I mean, he won the belt in 85, but I was like 12, 13 at the time, and it was everything, dude. Anybody that tries to tell you like how hot wrestling is now and how over it is and everything else, it is to an extent, but take it from me. There was nothing like WWF Saturday mornings, Hulk Hogan in 1985. Every person in the country knew who Hulk Hogan was. If they're around my age, a little older, a couple years younger, they're lying if they say they didn't. I'm not saying you had to be a fan, but everybody knew who Hulk Hogan was. He was everywhere, especially when he started teaming up with Mr. T and the war to settle the score, Cyndi Lauper and MTV. Chris, you guys like your age, you have no
Yeah.
comprehension on how big that was. MTV was everything to our
Mhm.
kids of our age. And when Hogan was on there with Lauper and they did the whole angle with Piper, which led to Mania 1, genius by the way. We just couldn't believe we were seeing it. We're like, this is Hulk Hogan's on MTV? Like what? The entire country watched that. Like the
Wow.
next day, the day of school when that happened, everyone was talking about it. Everybody couldn't just wait to get home and watch it that night. And then the next day, it was just, oh my God, did you see that? Like Piper and Orndorff were attacking the police, and Mr. T helped Hulk Hogan. Like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? And it was life changing, dude. It really was.
Do you think wrestling will ever get to that again?
Yeah, I don't think so. Only because it's not. There's too much variety. There's too many other things for people to do. I don't think the attention spans are there. I just don't. I mean, it's good. It's going to be popular, but how do you top? I mean, the main event when Hogan and Andre fought with the Hebner angle and all that in the Saturday Night's main event, it's 33 million people watch that, Chris.
Yeah.
33 million people are not watching wrestling today. That's
That's
not a slight on the business. It's
Mhm.
more money than they've ever had in the entire history of the industry. WWE made more last year than every other company combined in the history of professional wrestling. So
Wow.
financially, it's healthier than ever. But as far as mainstream publicity, it's still very niche. It's a niche audience, but it's a loyal audience. That's the thing about pro wrestling fans. They're extremely loyal and they're generous with their dollars.
Yeah. So another thing I'm curious about is your passion for pro wrestling. So you mentioned you used to go to all the shows, you used to watch it all the time. What was
Mhm.
that time that you eventually started that you wanted to be involved in it in some aspect?
1990. We
Yeah.
graduated high school. We were going to college, Nova and we had a friend of ours. His name was Rich Lom. He wanted to be a wrestler ever since he was a kid. We grew up with him. And he said, hey, man, there's a wrestling school that's opening in Bricktown, New Jersey. And we were like, what do you mean a wrestling school? Like, what? He's like, yeah, dude, it's Iron Mike Sharpe Wrestling School. And we were like, holy shit, Mike Sharpe from the Saturday morning. Like, we all knew who Mike Sharpe was. It was like, oh my God, this is like a real star. So he said, let's go check it out. So we went the weekend it was going to open, and we walked in, and there was a gentleman in the ring taking a few bumps and just rolling around and doing some stuff. Lo and behold, it was Devin Storm.
Wow.
Devin Storm, Chris Ford, Crowbar. He was the first student ever at Mike Sharpe's. That's who we met on the first night we went. And our friend Richie wanted to join, so he joined. And we weren't going to join. We were just going to go with Richie and watch it and hang out. We had no desire. Probably about 3, 4 months in, Nova said, maybe I'll do this like people join a bowling league or karate. Maybe I'll just join this to train and get in shape.
Mhm.
So he joined. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be a wrestler. I never did. I was pretty adamant that I was never going to get in the ring and wrestle and be an actual wrestler, but I was intrigued by the behind the scenes. I was behind how the show ran. I was always more intrigued with that. So, Mike Sharpe's, everybody started training. After a few months, he started running school shows. Every 2 weeks, we'd have shows at the school for friends and family to come. It was like $3 or whatever it was, but
Yeah.
those were like our WrestleManias. So we had a referee on one of the guys was a referee, and he got hurt or he quit. I forget what it was, but Mike Sharpe came to me the day of one of the shows. He goes, "Listen, you've been here. You come with your brother. I used to lift weights and all while everybody else was trained. I never got in the ring, but
Mhm.
I would go in as the sub referee and just mess around and try to ref." Sharpe said, "We need a ref for the shows. If you referee for me, I'll let you train here at the school for free to be a wrestler. If you ref the shows every 2 weeks for us." And I said, "Mike, I don't want to be a wrestler." I said, "Let me be a manager and learn behind the scenes." He said, "Deal." So that's how I did it. And almost for a year, I was the referee every 2 weeks at Mike Sharpe's with another guy, King Ron. So, and when the time came, I said, "Mike, I want to be a manager." And that's how Donnie B Deviously was born.
Where'd you think of the name? That was the next thing I wanted to ask you about.
It should be obvious, right? Paul
Yeah.
E. Dangerously.
Yeah. Uh,
I was a huge Paul E. fan, still am.
mhm.
Um, I've had some interactions with Paul. They were always gracious. We'll get to that. But very cool. I was huge. Johnny Dangerously, the movie with
Yeah.
Michael Keaton. That's where Paul got his name from. But I was a big fan of Paul, and he was Paulie Dangerously. And I was like, oh shit, I'll just be Donnie B Deviously.
Mhm.
And that lasted. It was my original gimmick. I was the leader of the stock exchange. That was my thing. Buy talents when they were down and out and low, and get them really popular and get titles on them, and then sell them high. So it was buy low and sell high.
Was that your idea?
Yeah, it was my idea. It was
Wow.
And my gimmick was I was like a pool hustler, like a pool shark. I carried a pool stick. Everybody had to have a gimmick, right? Paul had a phone. So I had a pool cue, which was probably the worst gimmick in the history of pro wrestling managers because it's so impractical. Like you have to carry, like Paul was smart. He had a goddamn phone. Jimmy had the racket. Jimmy Hart had the megaphone. Other guys, Fuji's cane. But I had a stupid, like 6 foot tall pool stick that nobody ever wanted to get hit with. So I used to be careful with it. I had certain ones that I gimmicked so it would break easy, but it was still a funny story about that. Real quick, I'll tell it. I managed. I think it was Tommy Fierro had a show, and the main event was Nailz. Remember Nailz, the convict? Him against Abdullah The Butcher. So yeah, crazy Abby, right? And I'm scared shitless because they say I'm going to manage Nailz against Abby, and I'm like, oh my god, if I make a wrong move out there, I'm dead. So Abby comes up in the locker room. He says, hey, when you hit me with that pool stick, you better make sure it breaks or I'm going to stab you with it. And I'm like I'm literally shitting a brick. I'm like, oh my God, Abdul the Butcher is going to kill me. So I had nothing to cut it with. I didn't have my saw with me, nothing. I had a butter knife, a serrated butter knife I got from the kitchen of the school we were doing the show in. And I'm in the bathroom hiding in the corner, sawing my pool stick to make sure that it breaks when Abby goes to use it because he was going to use it during the match to hit Nailz. He takes it during the match. He calls for it. I give it to him. He rears back to hit Nailz with it. And it broke. When he lifted it in the air and he came down, he hit Nailz with it. I thought I was a dead man. But, he was fine afterwards. But that's my thing with that. And then I carried the pool stick maybe for a year. And then I got rid of the pool stick and I got rid of the name Deviously because as egotistical I was at the time, I was like, it takes too long to sign autographs. Donnie B Deviously. It's a pain in the ass to sign Deviously. So I just dropped the Deviously. And everybody called me Donnie B anyway, like forever. So I was just Donnie. I've been Donnie since I was 5 years old, even at 52. But Donnie B was just my last name's Bucci. So it was just Donnie B. And then I added Deviously. And then the whole big 80s thing happened after that.
So when I think about big 80s Donnie B, one thing that sticks out is the white blazer. So when did that inspiration come in?
Jan Hammer's Miami Vice. Michael Mann's Miami Vice on NBC. It was the greatest. I'll go to my grave defending it. It's the greatest television show of all time by our finest American actor, Mr. Don Johnson. And speaking of which, I have my little custom-made. Awesome. Somebody made one of these for me. I did not make this. I don't have the talent, but somebody made my Donnie B action figure. Very cool. But I adopted the look from that. Nobody had ever done it. I had never seen a full white Miami Vice tuxedo. And as a shoot, it was an actual tuxedo from the show. It was the Miami Vice. It was called the After Six collection. It was a collection of tuxedos that was around in the mid to late 80s. I had a 32-inch waist back then. It was the After Six collection, pure white. I loved it with that. And I used to change out the shirts to pink or green. I had a bunch of different pastels, but that was my look. And I see guys that I think the Bucks did it. A couple other guys that wear it. And I'm like, that's cool, but you ain't big 80s, bro. Like, you know what I mean? I pioneered that. Like anybody else can claim it. That's cool, but we all know.
So when you look at your brother's career, obviously when you start managing, he starts doing wrestling. So throughout his career, what would you say are like some of the top moments you got to witness of his career, even a match or two?
Well, when he started, we both started for Dino Sana, which was a promoter in Pennsylvania, WWWA for Dino. And here's the funny part. A lot of people they're like, there's no way this is possible. I managed a gentleman named Rik Ratchet. We can get into that. And Ratchet used to work Nova all over the towns, all over the circuits for Dino, like 2 or 3 shows a weekend, like 3 or 4 times a month for Dino. And nobody picked up on the fact that me and Nova were twins. Nobody ever questioned it. They were just like, oh, and it would be like Abbott and Costello, me and Ratchet against Nova, putting him over huge and, all that, but nobody ever picked up on it. I knew he was destined for greatness. He was the best one out of all of us. I'll say it. Him and Devin were the 2 most successful members of Mike Sharpe's. I think overall Nova Mike was the most successful member of Mike Sharpe's. Just the levels that he attained in WWE as an executive, as a talent. Devin's had the longevity, obviously, but I always hold those 2 in a higher regard to everybody. Jerry Tootie, Hellraiser, all those guys. Candido even came through with us for a while. But everybody was successful in their own right. But as far as actual making it in the business, I would give it to Devin and Nova.
Nice. So I'm curious too. You talk about Rik Ratchet now. Recently, you did one of the podcasts. I forgot which one it was. It might have been a year or so ago. You talked about you would never come back managing. You had your thing with Rik Ratchet and the Backseat
Mhm.
Boys. So what was it about the connection with you and Rik Ratchet, you think?
I'll say it right now. Rik Ratchet is single-handedly one of the best independent overall talents that's ever been in the business. And people look at that statement and they go, "What? Are you out of your mind?" The real key as to whether somebody can work or they're over in the business is when you watch the audience during their matches. Is there anybody walking around getting popcorn, or are they dilly-dallying on their phone? There wasn't really many phones back then, but every single person in that building when Ratchet was in the ring was watching the ring. And the magic between Ratchet and Ratchet came to the school. This is a funny story. Ratchet came to Mike Sharpe's in like 94, 95. I want to say maybe 93. And he was there. He was he was a subscriber to the magazines, the after mags, we called them.
Mhm.
And he was writing an article for one of the after mags on the bushwhackers.
Wow.
And he came to the school just to check it out and get some behind the scenes knowledge. And I met him, and he was scrawny, long hair. He was a race car driver.
Mhm.
And the first night he was in the school, he said, "Man, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could be a wrestler." And I looked at him. I didn't know him for 5 minutes. I said, "Bro, if you become a wrestler, I'll be your manager."
Wow.
That's how improbable it was. And that was 1984. We've been friends for 30 years. But when he wanted to get in the business, he was also a big Ric Flair guy. So he did a whole Nature Boy Rik Ratchet thing. And it was just magic, him and I, Abbott and Costello, all the legendary matches. I mean, listen, Ratchet's been in the ring with Coco Beware, Mabel, Jerry the King Lawler, Dan Severn, Moolah and Mae Young. He holds a pinfall victory over Sid Vicious,
Wow.
Doug Gilbert, Too Cold Scorpion. I mean, the list is insane of the talents that Ratchet worked. And all of them, dare I say, were match of the night. When we did Contest of Champions 2 years ago, one of the main events on the show was Ratchet versus Lawler. And Lawler had Todd Frazier from the MLB in his corner, and Ratchet had Mark Carluzzo and Prince Nana. And it just so happened that we didn't announce at the time, but that was Ratchet's last match. He didn't want to make it a thing. And it also, unfortunately, was Jerry Lawler's last match in the ring.
Wow.
Jerry never had another match after that. He's in good health now. I love Jerry Lawler. There's worse. It was kind of an honor for me to promote that. Now looking back, and that we gave Jerry that spot. There was about 1,800 people there. I mean, of course, Jerry's wrestled in front of more, but at least we could give him that memory, going out on top huge with an MLB or superstar in his corner. And it was just a great night. But yeah, that was the magic of Ratchet, dude. It was Abbott and Costello. We showed our ass out there as heels. Like, we weren't afraid to look like fools and let somebody get over on us. And like, I just don't understand how more people don't understand that. Like, I don't get when I see some of these indie guys out there, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, I don't get it. There's not many Rik Ratchets out there. There's none that I know of.
Is there a match of Ratchet that stands out to you that you get to be a part of?
I would say I wish I would have been part of it, but him and Felipe wrestled Moolah and Mae Young for Jim Kettner in Delaware, and they beat the stuffings out of Ratchet, and they beat them. And the Sid one, because the irony of the Sid one is, earlier in the day, Tommy Fierro was running that show, and it was a different match. It was supposed to be Ratchet against somebody and Sid versus somebody else. I forget what happened, but I was like, I'm leaving. We had one match earlier. I said, I was going on, I think I had a date or something, whatever it was, but I had to leave. I said, I'm out. So Ratchet, you're on your own. If you're wrestling this other clown, I'm not doing that shit. So I leave. I get home. My cell phone starts blowing up. Everybody's like, you're not going to believe this. Ratchet pinned Sid. And I'm like, what? Nova and Rocco Dorsey and others had stayed behind, and they're like, they had it on tape, on VHS tape. They're like, you're not going to believe this. They raced home. We put it on, and I was in utter disbelief because like Jess McGrath, I think Dave Shear, I don't know if Meltzer, a bunch of people were calling, asking for the footage or asking if it was true because no one believed it. And then we put it out there in the ethos that, yeah, it was real. He pinned Sid. So I would have loved to be there for that. But probably my favorite one is we did, I want to say it was maybe 2001. We did at High School North, Toms River North, we did a cage match as our main event. It was a fundraiser for a fallen firefighter. And 2 days, the main event was supposed to be Nova and Meanie versus Ratchet and Felipe in a steel cage match. 2 days before Nova got pulled off the show, to do the ECW pay-per-view, which was going to be that weekend in California. So I put myself in it. I didn't want to, but I did. And we had a cage match. And I would never disrespect Snuka by saying I did a dive off the top. I fell off the top onto Ratchet through a table. And at the time, that was his last match. So that was pretty cool for me to be part of. But I would say those. I wish I would have been there for the Sid one. It would have meant a lot. But, I would say those. But every time me and Ratchet went out there, like, it was magic, dude. That's what I loved. I loved making the magic, for those few minutes out there and making the audience disbelief and suspend belief. And then afterwards, everybody they hated us during the match, but afterwards we were like, you guys are great.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times at the end of the night people came up to us and said, you guys were the best thing on the show.
Wow.
And that was hard. I mean, because one of my lessons I had to learn, that was one of the lessons I learned in booking. We could get to my booking, but that was one of the things I had to learn about booking is to not get over too much.
So another person you mentioned was Iron Mike Sharpe. So I'm curious, throughout your career training with him, what do you think, not even in the ring or even outside the ring, the biggest lesson you learned from him?
Perseverance. Never give up. Perseverance. If you want something, chase it. Get out there, especially in wrestling. It's not going to come to you. Get on the road. Put the miles in. Put the work in. Nothing is going to be easier handed to you, and never give up. That was Mike's big. Mike wasn't the greatest businessman, but he had a heart of gold. If you were on hard times or couldn't afford the payments, he would let it slide. Like, he was awesome with that. And he was like a safe haven for a bunch of wayward teenagers who, we weren't into drugs or liquor and all that. Like, we just wanted to be part of something, man. And it was a magical time. When I talk about the Brick Click of Nova, myself, Dorsey, Lupus, Ace Darling, Inferno Kid, Ratchet. Like, I know I'm missing a few, but Lupus, Sean Boyd, the Nomad. Just all these guys, man. Like, we're still friends today, bro. I just had dinner. We had a 10-person dinner in December in Atlantic City, and it's still the same guys I've been hanging out with since 1994.
Wow.
So how many people can say they've had friendships like this over 30 years? Like, it's crazy. That's what wrestling gave me.
Yeah. So another thing we're talking about coming up pretty soon, we have a big anniversary of the Backseat Boyz now. I know Johnny said originally in my podcast, your idea originally was 4 members, Flex Wheeler, Wife Beater, Trent, and Johnny. So seeing the Backseat Boyz and seeing this big anniversary comes up, what does that mean to you? Because this was your vision.
It's bittersweet in a way because I worked at a nightclub called the Osprey in Manasquan, New Jersey, and it was probably right around, I don't know, 6 months before we debuted. I don't know. It was probably around this 25 years, 6 months. I'm driving home one last summer night, and I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys came on the radio. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, there's never been a team in wrestling that's a boy band. I said, this is instant heat. Now, for full disclosure, at the same time, Bill Barons down in NWA was doing a gimmick with Shane Helms, I think Shannon Moore, and I think Joey Matthews and Christian York. I think they were called the Bad Street Boys, but I truly didn't know. Like, I wasn't, I knew who they were, but I didn't follow that. I didn't even know that we were doing the same thing, kind of. So me and Bill had that like for a few years, like who was first. Yeah. Those guys were all great though. They were awesome, incredible talents. I love them all, especially Joey and Christian. But yeah, it just came to me. I said, shit, man, I got to find some guys who are going to be loved by the girls and hated by the guys, but can kind of back it up in the ring when they need to be, like a heel version of like a Rock and Roll Express almost, like a Bizarro version.
Yeah.
So the first person I thought of was Trent Acid. I had met Trent when he was either 15 or 16, floating around the indie shows, wanting to set up the ring, and just a good South Philly kind of like dirty, grimy South Philly kind of guy that women just loved. Yeah. It was the weirdest thing. Trent had one of the weirdest. You either have it or you don't when it comes to charisma like that. Trent had it. So I knew him. I said, next time I see him, he'd come to the Dennis shows. I'm going to pull him aside. And it was in Pine Hill, New Jersey. He was there. And I pulled him aside. I said, hey, listen, I had this idea. And he's like, what is it? I told him. He's like, oh, I don't know, because he was the furthest thing from a boy band guy. I said, you got to trust me on this. I said, I want to make it either 3 or 4 guys. I think I kind of remember the Flex Wheeler. That might be true. Yeah. But Wife Beater was definitely one of them because I wanted a heavy. I wanted muscle. And I said, Wife Beater. I think even, I don't know if I consider Nick Burke Oh, you know what? No, it wasn't Nick Burt. It was Billy Real.
Mhm.
I considered Billy Real for a heartbeat, but Billy just was so toxic at this point and had heat with everybody. A lot of it was his own doing. A lot of it was just wrong place, wrong time. Um, and I just was like, I don't know, because I think Trent recommended it too. Trent said, well, what about my friend Johnny? He just started training. He's here tonight. And I look over in the corner and there's a guy named, I said, what's his name? He said, Johnny Kashmere. I go, get that. What's his real name? He said, it's it. His real name is Johnny Kashmere. I was like, holy shit, that's the perfect name. Cashmere, like a sweater for a boy band member. I said, this is incredible. So I said, come here. So he comes over. I had two shirts, kind of like I was doing the shirts before Jericho, like those aluminum foil looking.
Oh yeah.
I had two of them. I said, do me a favor, go put these on, come back out. They put them on, they come out. I just saw the two of them. I said, this is it.
Wow.
I said, you guys, new team. I said, Trent Acid, Johnny Kashmere, you're the Backseat Boyz. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, man, because all your action is in the back seat. And they're like, we love it. And I said, you guys run with it. They came up with the entrance, the outfits, and I would fine tune it. I did not plan on being their manager at first.
How did that come to be?
It's a funny story. So they started working for Dennis and started getting booked in different places, the back seats. And in order to expand, we had hooked up with these promoters named Jackie and Thomas out in Pittsburgh, and they loved the act. They loved them. They loved me. They loved Nova. So they wanted to bring us all out and pay us out the wazoo to work on these shows, trans money, the whole bit. We're like, okay. And she's like, what do you want to do in the show? So I just said, I'll manage Johnny and Trent. So I said to them, listen, I'll manage you guys and let's see how it goes. And we did it the first night. And it was the first night we hit the triple super kick, the triple power bomb that the Shield claimed to make famous.
Yeah.
We were doing that 15 years before them. Wow. If you go back, it's true. The triple bomb, the triple super, all that. We did it all. And we were like, I said, I think we got something here, dudes. Like, it's a cool physical dynamic because I was a lot bigger. I was like 225, pretty lean, pretty jacked. And I looked like $1 million out there. My hair was long. So I would always come to the ring nice and kempt and put together. But as the match progressed, I'd fall apart. And then these guys were my bumpers and they do all the work. It was just a cool dynamic. Yeah. So we started getting booked on that. Like the three of us, we would go out for Darren Wise out in PA and a bunch of other places. But when they did the CZW stuff, I didn't want no part of that. Mm-hmm. I said, that's not me. So that we can get to that. But when they started really working in CZW, I was like, nah, you guys are good. They used Dewey Donovan when they were there, which is cool. I had no heat with that. Mm-hmm. But it's bittersweet because obviously the way it ended with Trent, I wish it would have been better because I still see a universe where he's around in his early 40s and he's either in AEW or he's an agent or something. Yeah. Of all the deaths that I can think of in the history of wrestling, of a true talent that we really were robbed of, there's two I always think about, and they are Trent Acid and Larry Sweeney. As far as two guys who literally could have been the top. Like Larry could have been the top talker and top manager in the business, and he'd still be in it. And Trent could have been one of the top, whatever you want to say, like high flyer or whatever, like one of the true guys still in the business, still working at a high level. When he was on, there was nobody in the world that could touch him. I remember the first time they worked Nova and Meanie out in Pittsburgh, I think for Jim Miller, and we came in the back and Nova said, and at this point Nova was in the ring with like the who's who of ECW. He was in ECW. Yeah. Like Van Dam, Jerry Lynn. He said, I'll tell you what, Johnny's pretty good, but Trent is incredible. Trent's as advertised. He's better than advertised. And I was like, wow. And so for me, we had so many adventures and so much fun, the three of us out to Trinidad and Tobago and Alaska, and just so many just fun rides, and just that was the funnest time I ever had, was just fun with them. Just because I was their shoot manager, bro. Like if we had to get our licenses renewed, I did all that. I drove the car. I got the rental car. I paid for our food. Like, you know what I mean? I did everything. But that's what managers do. I mean, I think that's what they should do.
Yeah, so Larry Sweeney was mentioned a few weeks ago by Tank Toland, who also talked very highly of you, because he even said it. You gave him his first big opportunity in wrestling.
I did. Tank, interesting story, which a lot of young guys should listen to if they're listening to this right now. We ran a show at it was a Good Sports USA or something in Aberdeen. Gangrel was on the show. I remember I had to go get Gangrel. It was for another promoter. His Carmine something his name was. I forget what his name was, but it was his show. and I brought Gangrel, but at that show, a guy comes walking over. He's well dressed in a shirt and tie, looks like $1,000,000. He said his name is Tank Toland. He's getting in the business. He's like, "Do you have anything for me tonight?" I'm like, "Well, not really. I don't know." But he looked like $1,000,000. Do you mind if I help out? In a shirt and tie and everything else, son of a bitch, started putting the ring together, setting up chairs and putting the ring together in a shirt and tie. And I said right there, and it might have been Mike Ilian's show. I said to AJ Sparks, Mike Ilian's, I said, "We're booking that guy." And then the next show we ran, and then every show after that, Tank was one of our mainstays. Tank was one of the first guys when I ran PCW, when I started Phoenix Championship Wrestling. I said, "You're going to be on every show," because of his work ethic. It was incredible, dude. I love Tank.
Yeah.
And then I formed him, and there was another guy named Mike Platinum Mike Preston. Platinum Mike was I still can't figure out how he didn't make it, but Platinum Mike Preston and Titanium Tank Toland. I called them precious metals.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. Look at $1,000,000. It was a great team, man. I don't know how that failed, but great times. Tank was a great
another
guy.
person I want to ask you about, you've been talking about recently, but you've talked about being friends with him for years. What was your first interaction with Big Boom AJ?
Oh, Big Boom AJ was friends with the Haas brothers.
Oh, wow.
That's how the Haas brothers got in wrestling.
Because of him?
Yeah, I'll tell you how. We when Mike Sharpe's closed in Brick, Mike couldn't keep the school. They were selling the building, so we moved to Asbury Park. This is where Sharpe's gets a little tricky, the lineage of Mike Sharpe's, because there's a before Asbury and after Asbury, or before Brick and after Brick. To me, the original Sharpe's and Brick Click and all that was when it was in Brick. When it moved to Asbury, there's a host of new people who came in. We were kind of entrenched in the indies by then. We still would go to Mike's once or twice a week or whenever we could, but we were actively working on the indies. So there was other guys. And we had met, Rocco Dorsey had met AJ, and I think he came to a nightclub, or Rocco knew him somehow, and we invited him to come to Sharpe's in Asbury. His first night there, Nova got in the ring with him, and I got in the ring with him. We coached him up, walked him through some stuff, and he said he liked it. And then he went back, and he's talking to the Haas brothers about it. He knew from Seton Hall. They all went to Seton Hall. Wow. And then the Haas brothers came and checked it out after that. And then I think they went to Jersey All Pro also. But yeah, and then that was 90, I don't know, 96, maybe 97. My years might be off, but we just hit it off. Like, we were around the same age. He had just, I wasn't with my wife then. I don't think he was either. I met my wife in 01, but he was just starting to date his wife around the same time as I did mine, as we started becoming friends and just always hung out. Oh, he's a big Marvel superhero guy, so are my whole crew. So we'd all go to the movies when they all started coming out with Iron Man, all the comics, and we all loved it. And just what I always loved about Andrew is what you see is what you get. People might think it's a work or an act. It's not, dude. That's Andrew. Just a fun-loving, good family man who just wants the best for his family. And his message is pretty cool, bro. He always talks, because they get a lot of hate online. And he always says the love or the hate, whichever one you feed is going to win. So that's why they don't subscribe, and they don't put over any hate, any negativity. They don't listen to it. I love that, dude. It's just, I don't know why in this day and age, somebody can't see something like that they're doing, the big boom and all that, the double chunk cookie. I don't know how people just can't see it and go, ha, or dig it, or even if they don't dig it, not shit on it, not comment on it. I don't understand how as a society we feel the need, if we don't like something, to get on a soapbox and just preach how bad something is or how terrible it is. I have never in my life, when I was a kid, I was Steve Harvey, I think it was, or maybe not, I don't know what it was, but Steve Harvey once said, "I'm not interested in hearing 100 ways on why something won't work. I just want to hear the one way how to make it work." And that's a theory I've prescribed my entire life. I could care less, like, don't tell me how bad AEW's crowds are, or how bad the booking is at WWE, or how this match was only 2 stars. I don't want to hear any of that. Just tell me the positives and how to accentuate and move everything forward. If, as a promoter and a booker, I can tell all the aspiring promoters and bookers out there, surround yourself with people who are going to help you find the answers to how to make something work. Not be in your inner circle and just yes you to death and tell you how great everything is. Here's another thing for promoters and bookers. I want to pull the curtain back a little bit. None of the people who work for you are your friends. None of the talent, none of the boys, the girls, the people you rent your ring from, none of them are your friends. All they're doing is placating you and telling you what you want to hear so they can get another booking. That's it. They don't give a shit if you lose your house or your car or anything else, as long as they get a payday and they can continue their dream. You will find a few who probably your friends. Like in PCW, I was pretty fortunate. I only booked good human beings. I knew they weren't pieces of crap. But for the majority, when all you see a promoter, here's how you tell. You see a promoter, an active promoter whose birthday is on Facebook. They have 500 people wishing them happy birthday. How you been, brother? Happy birthday. And then the guy next year says, I'm not promoting anymore. And there's 5 people on there that says happy birthday. That kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or so-and-so announces, hey, looking for a street team to help promote this event, or I need help doing this or that. And it's crickets. But then he says, hey, I'm looking for 5 guys for a show next weekend. He gets 500 emails, what I like to call the how you been, brother email, which was always my favorite. I was the designated heat guy for Dennis, too, when I was the booker. But that was always one of my favorites because we didn't have email back then. I'd get the phone call for some unknown number, and I'd pick it up like, hey, brother, how you been? It'd be like Chuck Williams or somebody like that, or the Metal Mania. I'd be like, yeah, what do you want, man? Oh, brother, I was thinking about you. Oh, yeah. Hey, by the way, I see that show's coming up next weekend. You need anybody? I'm available. Yeah, no shit, because you're the shits. But,
So quickly back to Big Boom AJ. What was it like? Because you were there live to see that match and see him relive his dream all over again.
Incredible.
Yeah.
One of the coolest things I've ever seen from watching it in the back. I'll pull the curtain back a little bit more. First of all, my thanks to Tony Khan and all of AEW. They could not have been more generous and forthcoming with their seats and talent and everything else, and allowing my family to come there for the night. It was awesome. Amanda, John's wife, John Huber, Amanda Huber, she's in charge of a lot of that stuff. She came up to where I was sitting, and because AJ had arranged for me to go in the back and sit in Gorilla and be with him in his dressing room before the match, she came up into the audience and got me. Wow. And on the way to the elevator, we exchanged pleasantries and started talking and found out how many of the same people we knew. And she was flabbergasted when I said who I was. She's like, wait a minute. You were the guy with the long hair that managed Johnny and Trent? Oh my God. She's like, I know exactly who you are. Like, she was flabbergasted. And I was like, yeah, that's me. She's like, holy shit. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm in an elevator with Donnie B. And I'm like, nah, that's cool.
You're a legend.
I know, but she was very cool. But I can tell you this, I'm not breaking the fourth wall here, but a lot of big shows like that, they have a monitor where a lot of the talent can gather around and watch it on the monitor. In wrestling, I don't want to expose it too much, but it's called selling out the curtain. When everybody's watching it, the monitor's back there. And I'm telling you, there were dozens, if not 60, 70 people watching this monitor, a who's who. And you could think of everybody who was on the show that night. They were all watching the monitor 5 feet away from me. I was standing right next to Prince Nana, Swerve Strickland, Malachi Black, the Outrunners, MJF. Everybody was watching this, and they're all watching. And they're watching for 2 reasons. To see the guy who's responsible for a lot of the house there that night, to see him sink or swim. Now, don't kid yourself. A lot of those people were saying to themselves, this is awesome that he's here. It's helping all of us. But there was a handful that were saying, I can't wait to see him fail. This science experiment by Tony Khan is going to be a bust. But I'm telling you right now, 2 minutes in, and all props to QT, an incredible hand, one of the most underrated ever. But 2 minutes into the match, everybody watching the monitor was hooked. Every time they showed the Rizzler, everybody went nuts. Wow. When AJ went up for the superplex, nobody there thought he was going to hit it. He went to do it, and they thought it was just going to get bumped off. When he hit, I'm telling you, when he hit that superplex, the entire back stood up and went out of their minds, dude. Everybody, the boys, everyone was going ape shit over it. The finish, it was such a great match. It was what it needed to be. In the back, Andrew's son, Big Justice, he had got slightly injured. He was okay, but I can just tell you this. It was I've been around a lot of promoters, and they brought Big Justice to the back and they laid him down just to make sure he was okay. And I will not go into all the details. It's private, but I saw Tony Khan come in the back and do a few things that said to me, I don't know Tony from Adam, but this is a good human being.
Nice.
I'll just leave it at that. What I saw Tony Khan do that night for Big Justice and AJ was incredible. I just couldn't believe it. And I saw it with my own 2 eyes. I was standing next to Jeff Jones, Will Hobbs, and the Big Show were all in the room, and we witnessed what he did. And I just said, this is amazing. This is a good human being. So for any flack that Tony gets out there, I will never listen to it. I will never put it over. I will never sell it because I saw firsthand what a good human being that Tony Khan is.
Nice. So when I think of Big 80s Donnie B, you've talked about it before, Phoenix Championship Wrestling now. I say it all the time. You're one of my favorite minds in pro wrestling. So when we talk about Phoenix Championship Wrestling, what would you say was the vision for it?
To be like nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
The Phoenix, I got the inspiration. I was parked at a stoplight in Tom's River, and I was an older car guy. There was a Firebird in front of me, and I saw the Firebird on the hood of the car, and it hit me like a lightning bolt because my first promotion, the first show I ever did was called Big Buck Promotions Presents Pro Wrestling. I was like, okay. But when I decided I want to start a company, I didn't want to be like Palms River Wrestling or New Jersey Wrestling. I wanted something that could be in any state or any country, anywhere in the world. It wasn't restricted by a geographical location. It wasn't like I'm the heavyweight champion of Georgia. Like I wanted something that you could be like, this isn't regional. Could be anywhere. So I was thinking of a bunch of different names, and I saw the Firebird, and it literally just hit me, like rising from the ashes of all this shit that was in New Jersey at the time. I said, it's a Phoenix rising from the ashes. We're going to be Phoenix Championship Wrestling. And some people didn't get it at first. They were like, huh? And then when my buddy Cannon, Mark Malaccio, who's my right hand, he made the logo and everything, and we presented it. And then people got it. They were like, dude, this is cool. And dude, we were around before Ring of Honor. We had our first show before they did. And like I had Daniels, Kazarian, Eddie Guerrero. I had all those guys. Like, so we were a hybrid of what ROH kind of turned into, but like with Monday Night Raw and family values. Like I wanted the whole thing. I wanted you to spend a third of the price of going to WWF, but have the same kind of experience, the interaction with the wrestlers, hands-on, good, clean entertainment. But for me, I wanted to use guys that actually had a chance at becoming pro wrestlers, a contracted professional athlete in the United States to further their careers, mixed with guys who knew they were never going to get to the next level, but they were confident enough in their abilities, and I was confident enough in them as performers that I could put them out there without putting on an embarrassing product. That's what Phoenix was. It was a brainchild of myself and a couple other guys. It was, I leaned a lot on like Nova and other people. Dennis Coralluzzo, of course. There would have never been a Donnie B without Dennis Coralluzzo. And happy birthday to Dennis Coralluzzo. He'd be 72 today. But yeah, that's where I learned all my booking philosophies, from Dennis and from Jim Cornette.
Wow.
And a lot of that bled into Phoenix.
So one thing about you, you have like an eye for success. Like you said, Ring of Honor wasn't even out yet, and social media wasn't even around. So how was the process to find some of these guys? And was there anyone that right off the rip you knew were going to be stars?
Sanjay Dutt.
Yeah.
The way we found stars was tapes and word of mouth. If I had a guy like Chris Daniels or Kazarian, I had a young AJ Styles on one of my shows. AJ Styles slept on my mom's couch.
Wow.
Because he didn't want to take the extra $150 to get a room for 2 nights at a hotel. He wanted a promotion to have the money so that we could use it for the promotion. He said, I'll just stay on your couch if that's cool. He stood at my mom's house on our couch.
Wow.
Yeah, true story.
That's crazy.
Yeah, tapes, VHS tapes. I had a guy, one of our guys, Dr. Hertz, Kevin Glenn. One of his jobs, if people, I'd say send the tapes, and I'd have Kevin look at the tapes, and he had a VHS tape, and it was of Sanjay Dutt down in Virginia. And he was amazing. And I called him up. I'm like, hey man, we have a show 6 weeks, whatever it is. Here's the pay. It's not a lot, but you get out of Virginia, you come up here with a carload of guys. And he did it. And he came up, and then I used him on every show after that. I love Sanjay. I think he was fantastic, dude. But yeah, that's what it was, man. Word of mouth and just VHS tapes and going to other shows and seeing talent too. It got a little tougher.
Yeah.
Because Donnie B, the manager, was different than Donnie B, the owner of PCW, because I couldn't walk into a locker room. I used to love working for Dan McDevitt down in Maryland. I was a manager down there. I managed a team called Two Dope and Sideswipe. I was white chocolate Donnie B. I was the only white guy that they liked. They were a black tag team, so that was the gimmick. It was awesome. But it got to the point where I really couldn't even go because, like, as soon as I'd walk in a locker room, I'd get eyeballed left and right. Oh, Donnie B, don't book us. How we like? It just got tedious, man. Like. So I stopped. I loved being a manager. When I was a promoter for PCW, I tried not to really work ringside as a manager that much because I'd have to go to other shows. I'd be fighting people all night, like why I didn't book them. And like,
yeah,
Rock and Rebel was the worst. Every time I'd run into Rebel, hey brother, how come you don't book me, brother? And I remember just looking at him, a terrible human being. But I remember looking at him and saying, The same reason I don't book my neighbors, Chuck, because you're the shits. You know what I mean? That's a true story.
Wow.
But yeah, man, that's how we did it, bro. That's how we did it back then. There was no social media.
Yeah.
You know, word of mouth by other promoters too. Like if Dennis would call, I'd say, "Hey, man, this guy's coming up. Give him a shot." I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. So when you look at Phoenix Championship Wrestling, is there like one match or even a rivalry or storyline that you think will define the company, or if like somebody who's brand new to Phoenix Championship Wrestling?
Eddie versus Nova.
Wow.
Eddie Guerrero versus Nova. It served two purposes. It legitimizes as a company, and it gave Nova the confidence to know that he could be a WWF superstar. He had the talent. I always thought he was wasted. Not wasted in ECW, but they could have done so much more. Him and Chetty should have at least had one tag run against the Impact players. There was no reason not to. I thought that was a misstep on Paul's part. But when we did the show before it, at the end of the night, I went out and did a big promo in the room. We never had less than 250 or 300 people every time. We had the Phoenix Arena every 6 weeks we ran, and we had about 300 people that night. We could fit, if we really wanted to pack the chairs, and we could fit like 400, maybe 450. So we had a little over 3. And at the end of the night, I got in the ring. I did this big speech about how the next show we were bringing somebody in, and he's calling on the phone because he wants to issue a challenge to the best person we have. Is a really cool angle. Cannon came out, handed me the phone, and said, "The guy's on the phone right now." Nova was in the ring, and I did this whole speech, and I said, "Nova, on the next show, blah, blah, will you face this gentleman?" And Nova talked to him, and he's like, "Oh my God, yeah, yeah." And he hangs up, and Nova says yes. And I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's official. Next month here, it will be Nova versus Eddie Guerrero."
Wow.
The place went nuts, dude. And I knew it was big, but I didn't know how big. We sold that night all the front row, and I knew it was big because Daniels came in for that, and so did Kazarian. The night before that show, we were pretty much sold out of tickets, but I was at we were at the TGI Fridays in Toms River, New Jersey, and I had got 2 people called me on the cell phone, and they were begging for tickets. So they actually came to the TGI Fridays while we were eating dinner. Me, Nova, the boys, everybody, to get some of the last remaining tickets. We had over 600 people in the building.
Wow.
But we could only fit like 450. I remember working the fire marshal and telling me, yeah, there's like 400 people here. It might have been closer to 700, to be honest. I really don't know. We ran out of chairs, standing room. That was the main event. It was about a 23-minute match. And what I'll always remember, that true story I'm about to tell you. But the winner, we were going over at the back, and Nova and Eddie start talking, and Eddie's doing this. And Eddie at the time was released from WWE. He had his problems, but he was going around the circuit, and certain companies brought him in, and they had Eddie lose to like their quote unquote top guy, which was, I thought, was insane. And Eddie, Eddie didn't complain or nothing, but he was going to fight Nova on this show, and they're coming up with the ending. And I remember it clear as day. Eddie said, "Yeah, that's when you go over and it's now you'll win." And Nova's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Okay, what?" And Eddie's like, no, I'm going to put him over. This is hometown. And Nova looked right at Eddie Guerrero. I'll never forget this. He said, "Eddie Guerrero, there is no way I will ever beat you in a pro wrestling match. I will not beat you tonight. I will never pin your shoulders, Eddie. I'm telling you right now. We can argue about this all night." And Eddie got a tear in his eye, and he started crying a little bit. He hugged Nova, and he said, "Thank you. So let's go have the match." They had the match. It was phenomenal. They come in the back. I can expose the number now, but Eddie was... Gary, I gave him it was $1,500 for his payoff. And that was a fee that was negotiated between Rob Feinstein. I still don't know the truth, but Rob and Les Thatcher had told me it was $1,500, and Les had to get $300 on top of that or whatever. It was a vig to go through Les, whatever. That's fine. But, and this is a true story that I'm about to tell you. I handed Eddie Guerrero his envelope with $1,500, 15 $100 bills in it. And he looked at it, and he thumbed it like a deck of cards, and he said, "What is this?" I said, "Your pay, Eddie. It's $1,500. He said, "My pay was what he did for me in that ring tonight." And he put it back in my hands. And he said, "You take this envelope and give a little extra to everybody on this show tonight." He said, "Will you do that for me?" I said, "Okay, Eddie." And I did it. And Eddie Guerrero gave me back his pay envelope, and he worked the show for free. And all the boys got a little extra payoff that night from Eddie Guerrero.
Wow.
Yep.
So when we talk about Phoenix Championship Wrestling, why did it ultimately end?
I became a law enforcement officer. Truth be told, I had did it for about 4 years. And really, what else was there for me? I mean, we had great shows, the biggest shows ever in Jersey at that point. I had DDP, the Diamond Dallas Page show in Point. I had Bigelow on shows, Guerrero. We had weekly TV, Firebird TV on Channel 8 in Ocean and Monmouth every Wednesday night. The very first show, it was our debut show was going to be on. We went to an Applebee's. We had a watch party, and it was one of the coolest moments of my life, walking in Applebee's and asking them to turn on Channel 8 at 8 o'clock, and our TV show was on their TV. And that might not sound like a big deal in today's day and age, but for a bunch of guys on a shoestring budget to walk into your watering hole, your local bar, local restaurant, and say, that's my show, it was so cool, bro. That was an accomplishment. But having done all that, I had just started dating my girlfriend, wife now, at the time, and I knew at that point I was never going to WWF. I didn't want to live the nomadic lifestyle. I like travel, but I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to live out of a suitcase. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family and some stability, and that's why I didn't want to do it anymore. And everybody said, oh, you captured lightning in a bottle. I said, okay, I could do it again in a heartbeat. I came back in 2022. I put 900 people in Lacey High School in a blink of an eye when they told me it would never be done. And then 2 years later, I said, I'll top that. I ran Tom's River, had 1,800 people, and had Sting on the show for Nova's final match. So it's like, okay, everybody told me for 20 years it could never be done. Ocean County was dead. You'll never draw. It's the shits. Wrestling's dead. Okay, here, I'll do it twice. So, I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Why do it? I'm a big fan of new challenges, new adventures. I don't like to stick around for something too long. I mean, I had the greatest times ever, like I said, with the backseats, with Ratchet, learning under Dennis Coralluzzo, all the adventures. And so it's like, move on, man. I don't get these guys who are still floating around, and they're a bunch of never wases. Like, I don't understand how some of these guys have retirement matches or this and that never did anything. Like, can I retire from time travel? You know what I mean? Or like being an astronaut? I never did it. I think it's so stupid. Independent Wrestling Hall of Fames and this and that. Like, what? I mean, okay, thank you for the accolades, but in the end of the day, it's just a way for guys to still be floating around past their prime because they got nothing else to do. And if they're cool with that, so be it, man. If they're not hurting anybody, but I think it just dilutes the talent pool and dilutes the business a little bit. I can't assemble a bunch of people tomorrow and go play football and charge people admission and call it professional football. I mean, I don't know why some of these people think they could just throw on a sweatshirt or sweatpants and go in the ring and roll around and charge tickets and call themselves a pro wrestler. So somewhere along the line, those lines got blurred.
Do you have a Dennis story that sticks out?
Oh my God, so many. Half I can't tell. I can never tell them why Mark is still alive, but I can tell you this one. We were Dennis Coralluzzo and Mark and a gentleman who is a sports announcer in South Jersey, but I will not divulge who it is. But they used to crank call all these people all the time, and they finally got a hold of this old lady. And Dennis called up and he said, "Is Jim there?" It was a rib. They were looking for Jim Cornette. He misdialed Jim Cornette's number. And the lady said, "Ain't no Jim here, you MFer," and started cursing him up and down. So they're like, what on earth? So they called the lady the next day, same thing, MF and up and down. They called this poor, there's tapes of this out there. We taped it. They called this poor lady probably for like a year straight. It's a year, just constantly berating her. That one, and then when Dennis's big gimmick was to get people to go to the restaurant after the shows to get paid because it was a deal with the sponsor. Like, it looked good and all, but I remember we're at one of the shows and Dennis is just losing his mind that somebody skipped out on the bill and he was going to kill them. He was going to go in the parking lot and find. He's losing his mind. I had to like talk him out of the down off the ladder. And turns out it was this mentally challenged man named Sal Petrillo who literally could never hurt a fly. And I had to prevent Dennis from killing him. It was just one of those nights where you're like, huh? But every day, you don't understand. It'd be like 2 a.m. I'd get a phone call from Dennis out of nowhere and be like, "Hey, bro. Hey, dude. What do you think of this?" I had a friend of mine whose name is Chris Colatrelli. He had long hair. He kind of had like a Jesus look to him. About 3 a.m. one night, Dennis calls me and says, "Hey, man." Hey, man. That was big for, "Hey, man. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sleeping, bro." "Hey, man, your friend Chris still around, CC?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Listen, he wanted to be on a show." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I got this great idea. We'll do it at one of the next churches." He was big in the churches. He'd do fundraiser for the churches. He said, bro, what about we get him on the next show and we put on the poster, come see JC tonight live at the church, but we won't call him Jesus Christ. We'll just put his picture up there dressed like Jesus. And I'm like, I was like, I don't know, dude. Cause yeah, man, we'll pay him. We'll give him a payday. I'm like, I got to think about that one, bro. And then like the next day, Dennis would forget like that he even said it. Just like that, man. Like the one night we did a show at one of the churches, a famous Dennis story. If they ever do the Dark Side of the Ring, I think we have to tell this. And they are actually close to doing an episode on him.
Wow.
I thought it was going to happen. I've been pushing for it. I thought it was going to happen this season. It should have. The King of Carnies, Dennis Coralluzzo. It would be awesome. If they had an episode on Herb Abrams, they could have one on Dennis Coralluzzo. Trust me.
Yeah.
But Dennis, we did a show, and the main event was supposed to be, I want to say, I think Al Snow or no, Bob Backlund. Somebody was supposed to, or maybe Sid was supposed to be in the main event. And he no-showed. Dennis knew he wasn't going to be there. Didn't say a word. So the last match in the ring, I think was Al Snow was supposed to be there. He had canceled off, and Dennis didn't say a word. So the main event was supposed to be Al versus somebody. The semi-main was Lance Diamond, I think, against Bob Backlund. So they're done, and the crowd is still waiting for the main event because no one has said Al wasn't going to be there.
Yeah.
So Dennis comes running up to me and says, hey, man, we got to go. I just ripped off a bunch of nuns. And I'm like, excuse me? He goes, yeah, we got to get out of here, man. Al's not coming. I'm like, I know. Didn't you announce it? He goes, no, we never announced it. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. We hopped in a truck and drove away because he was my ride. But
wow.
Every day was an adventure with Dennis. I miss him dearly. He'd be 72 today. I'm blessed to still have his son, Mark, in my life. We hang out all the time and just some of the funnest times. Dennis Coralluzzo was one of the most influential people in my life. Taken way too soon. I loved him dearly. I never would have been a promoter or booker without his help or Jim Cornette's help. They shaped me. So all thanks to them. I truly wish Dennis was still here. I love Dennis with all my heart.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask you about, I remember texting you not too long ago, but first I'm curious, what was like the atmosphere for NWA New Jersey? And walk me through that promo you did, because I think I can still quote the whole thing you did. That was so good.
Oh, that was literally, we're walking in the back.
Yeah.
And Trent, I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to go with them. It was supposed to be Trent and Johnny with me. And Trent I forget, I think he had a tour of Japan that came up, and he had to go to Japan. And we still wanted to honor the booking for Bill because I'm friends with Barons. And I said, well, we'll still come down. Maybe I'll work with Johnny. He's like, yeah, absolutely, bro. Everyone's excited for the Backseat Boyz. And I'm like, oh shit, now we got to go.
Yeah.
So it was like it was Cornelia, Georgia at Wildside. We hopped in a van with the Reverend Ron Starr. I don't know if you know who Ron Starr is. He's an indie guy. Ron Starr, super great dude. We loaded up. We stopped at the first Krispy Kreme we could find. We got a bunch of boxes of Krispy Kreme. We drove, I think it was like 18 or 19 hours to Cornelia, Georgia, parked on the side, went in, met everybody. AJ Styles was there. I think Ron Killings, K-Quick, I think he was there. Bunch of other guys. Everybody was cool as hell. They knew who we were. Like, who's these guys from the North, man? This is the famous Backseat Boyz. And some of them had known Trent. So literally 30 seconds before we're about to go out, Baron says, hey, you guys want to do a promo for the match? We'll cut it in later. I'm like, okay, turn the camera on. And that was it. That promo. It was one take. Just did it off the top of my head. And I'll never forget when we were done, I looked to my left. AJ Styles was standing there. Onyx, I think his name was. There was like 5 or 6 guys. And one of them just started slow clapping. And I think it was either AJ. I don't know who it was. Looked at another guy and goes, he's good.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I looked at him and said, I'm not even a wrestler. And they're like, what? And then we had the match, and I did pretty good. And I come in the back. I can't remember who it was. I don't think it was AJ. If somebody comes up to me and goes, I'll tell you, and they had a thick Southern drawl. He goes, I'll tell you what, for a guy who's not a goddamn wrestler, you're better than half the guys on the show.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, thank you, man. And then we were done. We got in the van and drove home.
Wow.
We drove down like 18 hours, did the show, got back in the van, and drove back to Philly.
Wow, that's crazy. That promo was iconic. I remember when I first found it, I watched like 9 times back to back and then texted you about it.
Yeah, it was just fun, dude.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how guys who are in the business don't train themselves or try to figure out how to do that. Like, I don't, you got to be ready. If you don't know where you're going to be or when the inspiration is going to hit, someone's going to ask you to cut a 30-second promo or 45 and sell yourself. Sell. That's what we were doing. pretend that whoever's watching it has no idea who you are.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I tell these guys. Some of these guys, I see their promos and they keep making the same mistakes. I look at them, they're like 4 or 5 minutes long. And they're just, I try to tell these guys, no one on earth wants to watch an indie guy talk for 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
You're losing them after 20 seconds. No promo in the independent wrestling world should be more than like 30 seconds, if that. Big match coming. Hey, everybody, this is Big 80s Donnie B. Next Saturday night, I'm going to be fighting Chris Sanders one-on-one. There's only going to be one of us standing at the end of the night, and I can assure you it ain't going to be me. So, Chris, I'm going to send you packing with whatever's left of your body that night home to your mama. Boom. Come see us that night. Like something like that, bro. Yeah. Like, I don't understand how these guys can't do it.
Now, during that, was Johnny a big talker? Because I know you took the reins on that promo.
No. Johnny was never the talker.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons. Johnny didn't like to talk. Even Birdie, even Trent really didn't like to talk that much. He could. He didn't. Johnny kind of had to do it out of necessity after I wasn't their manager anymore, or Dewey Donovan did it. But Johnny really wasn't the talker. No, he didn't really like it. And he's good at it.
Yeah.
But that was my role too.
Yeah.
To talk him to talk. When we were heels, the objective was to get so much heat on us because we were good. So there was a portion of the audience that was like, these guys are talking a lot of shit, but they're pretty awesome. So how can we knock them?
Yeah.
So that was the other thing too. Like we had to just maintain our heel persona.
Wow. So one thing that I absolutely love right now, and I probably talk about you once a week, is the Skywalker Championship now. I talk to Sammy Diaz. He's the current champ all the time now. I tell him about Donnie B and the Backseat Boyz and all that. But for you, I seen that Facebook post you made. But what was the vision? How long was this an idea behind it?
You know, it's funny. I just saw last week Triple H had this thing, WWE ID, with these ID championships. We're supposed to represent the best indie talent out there. What an idea, huh?
Yeah.
If only somebody had that idea 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's where it came from. I said there should be a universal championship that can be represented on the indies by a talent that can take it all over like a journeyman. Here's the secret of the Skywalker belt. And I thought Skywalker was a cool title because it's in the sky. Like it's there, man. It's like what it represents, like a Jedi or Skywalker. And the vision was whoever the champion, Anthony Green was the inaugural champ. And there's a journal that goes with it. And in the journal, you write down how you felt when you won the belt, what it meant to you to be the champion every time you had a defense. So the objective is this journal that goes along with the book. And I wrote a certain something in the beginning of it that stays between me and the champions, but there's a page in there on what it means, what the title means. And it means more than that. It's kind of like the Knights of the Templar. Whoever is the champion should be a representative of the business with the wholesome qualities that make pro wrestling special, as far as living their life unsullied or in a reputable manner, a stand-up human being. That's what the Skywalker Championship represents. All the good that's in pro wrestling, and that's in the journal. And the objective is, the hope is that as this belt makes its way across the globe, maybe for the next several years, 10 years, I hope it's a long time, that this book, at the end, we can take this journal and make it into a book. I think it would be fascinating to read the thoughts of all these guys who have had the title, what it felt like when they won it, when they knew it was time to give it up, their defenses, their views on what the title means to them. Like, I think it's really cool. It's never been done before. That I don't think there's ever been a title that was designed to go everywhere and be defended in any company at any time with no politics. I don't care who the champion, as long as these standards are upheld for the next person to win it from the person who had it. That's the only requirement I had.
Yeah. So with the Skywalker title, we've had Anthony Green was the first champ, Ichiban was second, and Sammy Diaz. Couldn't pick three better guys.
Yes.
And I take a lot of pride. I've called more matches for the Skywalker title than anything, and I always put over Big 80s Donnie B.
Thank you. I love it, man. And I think, listen, I'm not saying that it's my inspiration, but I saw that WWE ID thing, and I'm like, kind of the same thing, man. Like, here's a title. It's not exact same, but I'm like, this title is supposed to represent some of the best and the ideals that of a talent that they're looking for. The same talents and qualities that are in a Skywalker champion is what the WWE should be looking for. Men and women that they can put out there in a non-embarrassing fashion that won't denigrate the business or bring shame to themselves or their family or their craft. And that's what a champion is, dude. The belt, the weight of the belt. The reason that I never understood why people complain, the weight of the belt is kind of a symbolism when you carry it through the airport and you have to carry it in your bag, you're carrying the weight, not the physical weight, but it's the weight of the responsibility that the title brings. The weight of the responsibility that the company is putting on your shoulders to be its flagship bearer, their representative. When your bag is heavy, it's heavy because of the responsibility that you now have as the number one representative, as a champion. So that's why when guys talk about the weight of a belt they have to carry around, that's what the weight is. That physical weight is the representation of what you are. You are the representative of the company, dude. That's the weight of the belt.
Mm-hmm. So another thing I'm curious about now, I know we're doing this podcast, but in 2023 in the fall, you're part of one of the most iconic podcasts, Potting with the Pundits. So there's no chance possible that I'll ever make a return?
You know, I never say never. That was it was a passion project for years. Myself, Nova, Raleigh Allen, and Dave Sturcio. We kept batted it around a few times. Nova and Raleigh have great banter together. That was the money on the show. It wasn't me. It was those two, their banter. And I think Dave's got a lot on his plate. He runs his whole network, his Fight Factory, and his podcast network. And I don't know if he just didn't have the patience to keep it going. I know Nova also had some scheduling conflicts. He said he had to teach. He teaches financial literacy 1 or 2 days a week for Ohio Valley Wrestling, Brown Snow. So he was doing that. I had some conflicts, but I don't know. It was a lot of fun. We did it. It was cool. I had a little bit of a different vision for it. I wanted it to be more like a show that you could have points, kind of like a what the hell is it, like a Pardon the Interruption or Pardon the Interruption, that kind of, like those kind of shows. Like I wanted that. Like it was cool. I'm glad we did it. It was fun. But honestly, I have more fun doing the Spocast with Johnny and those guys. And it's just, I love doing that. I love podcasting. I do have a good time with it. I think I'm pretty decent at it. So we'll see what happens. Potting with the Pundits was a lot of fun. I would never close the book on it. And our host, Jamie Silverberg, was cool. He was great at that. It was a good connection. It was good. I still talk to those guys. Everybody's cool. There was no heat, but just one of those things. It was short-lived. We did one season, and who knows, man? You never know.
Yeah. So before I get to the final question, I got to know, with this big Backseat Boyz anniversary, is there any chance that the white blazer ever comes back on again?
You know, I could tell you one way or the other right now, but I think if you come on April 27th, you might be pleasantly surprised.
So Donnie B, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. However, I've ended every interview the same now. The day that Donnie B decides he's all done with pro wrestling, which I hope never happens, what do you want big 80s Donnie B's legacy in wrestling to be?
I would say I want people to remember big 80s Donnie B as a promoter, booker, talent who never disrespected the business, left the business better than I found it. More importantly, knew when to get out of the business, didn't overstay my welcome, didn't owe anybody any money, never ripped anybody off, had a great time while I was in it, did the best I could with the tools that I had. I'd like to think that I had the skills and the talent and the ability to have gone to the next level, but I didn't have the desire. Yeah, that was the big thing for me. So my legacy, I would say, is I was a guy who had the chance to do something in the pro wrestling business, but the riches that it gave me as far as the relationships that I still have today that are more valuable to me than any millions of dollars that I could have possibly made in wrestling. If I pursued a full-time career in wrestling, I would have never met my wife. I wouldn't have my 2 daughters. My life would be vastly different. And I'm not knocking anybody who's pursued that. God bless them all. But for me, for Don Bucci, my legacy in wrestling was for a guy who, like I said, had a great time. I burned bright for a short period. I did everything I wanted to do, and I knew when to get out. And I think I was pretty fair with everybody I ever came across. If somebody has a bad word to say about me, nothing I can do about it. I tried to treat everybody as fair as I could. If you were talented and you were a good human being, I always had time for you. If you were a goof or a stooge or a jabron or some loser or something like that, I had no time for you, man. I just don't. But that's what my legacy would be.
Yeah. Thank you, Donnie, for joining me. I appreciate it. Like I said, it completely blows my mind. A few weeks ago, when we were talking about that promo, I was playing video games with one of the wrestlers. I forgot who, and I was like, bro, like, I'm really talking to big 80s Donnie B. Like, this stuff blows my mind. I say it. You're a legend, man.
Thank you, bro. I'm really impressed with you for such a young age. Your composure, your diction on the microphone, the way you speak, the way you handle yourself. I think the sky's the limit. My advice for you is just to keep doing what you're doing, creating content, honing your craft. Just every single time you do an interview or you speak, just hone it a little more. You're very focused. You're on your way. Talent, the thing about talent is it will always rise. You can teach it, you can craft it, you can hone it, but if you have talent, will always find a way to the top, man. So you keep plugging along. I don't know when it is, what form it will take, but you will be as successful in and around the pro wrestling business as you want to be, because you definitely have some talent.
Thank you very much, Donnie. I really appreciate you taking the time and you doing this, man.
No problem, my friend. Thank you to anybody who sat there for an hour and listened to me. I'm big. I've always had the same number for 35 years. Phone number. My thing on Facebook is Don Bucci. On Twitter, I'm B Big 80s on Twitter. Yeah. It's not hard to find me. Yeah. If anybody ever wants questions or you want to know anything, feel free. I'm very open with all that stuff. I'm not some clown that's going to blow you off. I have time for everybody. It's cool, man. I've always thought if somebody took the time to reach out to me to ask something, at least I could do is answer them back. So
thank you, Donnie. A year ago I reached out. I'm glad we got to do this. And thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. This was Best for Business.